Good morning, evening, or night, wherever you are. Welcome to WHAM Today. Take a deep breath, clear your mind, and let's drift through the whispers of today's world, one quiet thought at a time. As we wrap up Thursday, 10th April, 2025, let's see what stories are unfolding around us. China is facing significant economic headwinds due to escalating trade tensions with the United States, marked by reciprocal tariffs, with China's levies on U.S. goods reaching as high as 84%. These tariffs, initiated by President Trump and increasing to 145% before a temporary pause for most nations excluding China, are impacting Chinese export-oriented companies and raising concerns about technological decoupling. China has responded by increasing tariffs on U.S. goods by 50% and strategically reducing the number of U.S. films allowed for release. Despite efforts to boost domestic consumption, consumer hesitancy persists. China aims to tariff-proof its economy through investment and consumption, but remains vulnerable. China is also engaging with the European Union on electric vehicle imports. Despite these challenges, China asserts its balanced position as a strategic partner, friend, and comrade, while facing criticism for its stance on the Ukraine war. Amidst these tensions, the head of the British military, Adnan Sir-Tony Radakin, visited China for the first time since 2015 to discuss strengthening military cooperation. The United States, under President Trump, has significantly escalated trade tensions with China through a series of tariff increases, including levies on Chinese raw materials used by the pharmaceutical industry. These actions have led to retaliatory tariffs from China, impacting U.S. exports and contributing to global economic uncertainty. Trump initially paused tariffs for most nations for 90 days, while maintaining heightened tariffs on China, clarifying the total new tariffs on Chinese goods now stands at 145%. The U.S. Treasury Department has also identified both the U.S. and China as leaders in a sophisticated global system supporting the illegal opioid trade. The U.S. has pledged to deepen cooperation with Indo-Pacific partners. The European Union is actively seeking new trade partners alongside China in response to the trade disruptions caused by U.S. tariffs. The EU and China are engaging on issues such as electric vehicle imports. United States trade policies, particularly those enacted by President Trump, and the 125% tariffs on China, are causing widespread alarm and instability in the global economy. Trump's tariffs have sparked market volatility and criticism from former Treasury officials and economic experts who warn that worldwide tariffs will not incentivize firms to open manufacturing in the U.S. due to major instability. The U.S. government revoked over 600 student visas, some due to activism against the Gaza war and others for minor crimes. The U.S. Secretary of State adopted a more conciliatory tone with NATO allies, but a growing transatlantic divide remains. Pentagon Chief Pete Hegseth stated that Tehran should not have a nuclear bomb and insisted that the U.S. is not looking for war with China, but will counter Beijing's threats to the region. He also suggested the U.S. could revive military bases in Panama to secure the canal, an idea quickly rejected by the Panamanian government. The White House clarified that the 125% tariffs are in addition to earlier 20% levies applied for fentanyl trafficking. Schools would not get Homeland Security funding if they have a relationship with certain institutions like the Chinese Academy of Sciences. China faces escalating trade tensions with the U.S., including tariffs that have reached 125%. These policies are causing global economic turmoil and potentially benefiting China's chip supply chain. Experts suggest the trade conflict threatens complete decoupling, raising questions about the future need for the U.S. dollar. In response to U.S. tariffs, China and the EU have discussed strengthening economic and trade cooperation. China has denied allegations from Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky that over 150 Chinese nationals are fighting for Russia, dismissing his remarks as irresponsible. Beijing has also accused the U.S. of irresponsible remarks regarding Chinese recruits fighting for Russia. Washington's attempts to counter China's shipyards have sent shockwaves across the global industry. Focusing now on Russia, the country is reportedly recruiting Chinese mercenaries through social media to fight in Ukraine. Ukrainian drone video shows 4 captive Ukrainian troops being shot to death by soldiers with Russian uniform markings in the village of Piatikaki on March 13th. Russian advances in Ukraine have slowed, despite growing force size. Ksenia Karelina, a U.S.-Russian dual national imprisoned for a Ukraine relief donation, was released in exchange for Artur Petrov, a dual Russian-German citizen accused of military espionage. Lower revenues, partly due to President Trump's trade war, could prove more damaging to the Russian economy than existing penalties. A group of Russians attempted to disrupt Poland's commemoration of a president's plane crash. Turning to Ukraine, President Volodymyr Zelensky stated that over 150 Chinese men are fighting for Russia in Ukraine and accused Russia of dragging China into the war. A Ukrainian drone video shows 4 captive Ukrainian troops being shot to death by soldiers with Russian uniform markings in the village of Piatikaki on March 13. Russian advances in Ukraine have slowed, despite growing force size. The European Union has suspended retaliatory 25% tariffs on US goods for 90 days, following Donald Trump's pause, but countermeasures will resume if negotiations fail, according to Ursula von der Leyen. The 27-nation bloc has paused planned retaliatory tariffs on nearly €21 billion of US goods with the Trump administration. As tariffs on EU exports escalate, Europe is seeking a unified response, with trade ministers meeting in Luxembourg to discuss the way forward. China and the EU have discussed strengthening economic and trade cooperation. In Panama, the government rejected a suggestion from Pentagon Chief Pete Hegseth that the U.S. could revive military bases in Panama to secure the canal. Elsewhere around the globe, Greenpeace activists in London protested arms sales to Israel by turning the U.S. Embassy's pond blood red. Thailand has one of the world's strictest laws against criticizing the country's powerful monarchy. The IKEA in Vilnius, Lithuania, was targeted by Daniel Bardadim, who is accused of planting an incendiary device. Israel's recent airstrike in Gaza City, resulting in the deaths of at least 23 people, including women and children, has triggered international concern. The Israeli military claimed the strike targeted a senior Hamas militant amid reports of preparations to seize Rafah as part of a newly announced security corridor. Gazan health officials reported numerous deaths, while the Israeli military maintained its target was a Hamas operative. Mohammed al-Masri asserted that Israel is deliberately targeting civilians in Gaza and is not avoiding civilian casualties. Footage has surfaced showing 10 released Palestinian prisoners arriving at Al-Aqsa Martyrs Hospital in Deir al-Balah, Gaza, with evidence of torture. Ralph Wild emphasized the International Court of Justice, ICJ, ruled in 2024 that Israel's occupation of the Palestinian territories is illegal. Internal dissent within Israel has grown, with approximately 1,000 and retired Israeli Air Force pilots signing a letter calling for a halt to the Gaza war. The pilots accused the government of endangering hostages held by Hamas and pursuing political interests. Prime Minister Netanyahu supports the dismissal of Israeli reservists who advocated ending the Gaza war. Some view anti-government protests in Israel as attempts to maintain Jewish privilege rather than achieve true democracy. U.S. officials undertook efforts to negotiate a hostage deal between Israel and Hamas, meeting with Hamas 3 times, but Israeli opposition and shifting positions thwarted the effort. Hamas is reportedly concealing the identities of its top commanders to evade Israeli strikes and maintain power, especially amid calls for the group to relinquish control of Gaza. Israel released a Palestinian who participated in an attack at age 13 and later developed a mental illness in prison. His family and lawyers reported he was held in a small cell for 23 hours a day and suffered from paranoia, delusions, and attempted to slit his wrist. Israel has been trying to legally justify its attacks and treatment of Palestinians, even though it goes against international law. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu affirmed his government's commitment to voluntary migration from Gaza, an idea President Trump suggested was his during an Oval Office meeting. Mike Huckabee, President Trump's nominee to be ambassador to Israel, faced scrutiny for past statements on Palestinian identity during his Senate confirmation hearing. Turning to Turkey, a Turkish official reported that Turkey and Israel held technical talks in Azerbaijan, aiming to prevent conflict between their troops in Syria. The talks are intended to establish a channel to avoid potential clashes or misunderstandings over military operations. Since the end of Bashar al-Assad's rule, Syria has been subject to numerous Israeli airstrikes, targeting areas adjacent to Israel in an effort to disarm southern Syria. Israel has attacked Syria hundreds of times, stating they don't trust the new Syrian government and aim to disarm southern Syria. In the United States, Donald Trump stated that if Iran doesn't abandon its nuclear weapons program, Israel would lead a military strike against the country. Trump affirmed that if military action is required, it will be pursued. Japan is actively reinforcing its global alliances and tackling domestic, economic, and safety challenges. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte's visit to Japan highlights both Tokyo and NATO's shared desire to strengthen military cooperation in response to growing concerns about China, North Korea, and Russia, despite Japan's non-member status in NATO. Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba has committed to collaborating with Rutte on these issues. Japan welcomed the news of U.S. President Donald Trump's 90-day suspension of reciprocal tariffs, with the Nikkei 225 index surging 9.12% on Thursday. However, Japan will continue to observe the situation closely, with a leading government spokesperson describing Trump's decision as a positive development. Trump has also reaffirmed his opposition to the sale of United States Steel Corp. To Japan's Nippon Steel Corp. A plan is being considered within Japan's ruling coalition to provide a cash handout to alleviate the impact of higher U.S. tariffs and inflation. According to a preliminary report from the Bank of Japan, the producer price index in Japan increased by 3.3% in fiscal year 20, a record high for the third consecutive year. Furthermore, Honhai, a Taiwanese company renowned for manufacturing iPhones, intends to produce cars for Japanese automakers, potentially reshaping Japan's automotive industry. Concerns have emerged regarding the safety of Japan's traffic lights, with approximately 24% identified by the National Police Agency as exceeding their replacement date in fiscal year 2023. An AI application is being used to monitor the health of aging cherry trees to safeguard the Yaname tradition. A Japanese study has revealed that babies conceived during winter are less prone to becoming obese adults, suggesting a correlation between brown fat, cold weather, and reduced likelihood of adult weight gain. Amid declining membership and increased law enforcement scrutiny, Japan's largest Yakuza gang, the Yamaguchi-gumi, has announced an end to a decade-long conflict in Kobe. Shifting focus to China, 3 Japanese hairdressers have been detained on suspicion of engaging in business activities not permitted under their visas, thereby violating China's immigration laws. Turning to India, Air India is currently investigating an incident involving a passenger who urinated on a Japanese man during a flight to Bangkok. An independent committee has been established to review the matter and determine appropriate disciplinary measures. The United States and Russia completed a prisoner exchange freeing Ksenia Karolina, a dual U.S.-Russian citizen arrested for donating about $52 to a Ukrainian charity. Turning to the United Kingdom, King Charles and Queen Camilla unexpectedly visited Pope Francis, who is recovering at home. Ukraine claims that over 150 Chinese mercenaries are fighting for Russia, a charge China denies, stating they advise citizens against entering war zones. Defense chiefs from around 30 nations will meet at NATO headquarters to discuss Ukraine's future, with the UK and France pushing for troop deployments to monitor any peace deal with Russia. Separately, Ukraine is sending a delegation to Washington, D.C. to revive a stalled mineral agreement. The UK is weighing expanding its boiler upgrade grant in England and Wales beyond heat pumps due to low adoption rates. Hamas has petitioned the UK government to remove it from the list of banned terrorist groups, arguing it is a legitimate Palestinian liberation movement. Sky will launch a UK version of Saturday Night Live in 2026, with Lorne Michaels as executive producer. UK cinemas are asking patrons to stop throwing popcorn during a Minecraft movie screening. EU spokesperson Olaf Gill expressed the European Union's interest in negotiation and discussions without elaborating beyond prior communications with the United States. Dominican Republic is reeling from the collapse of the Jet Set nightclub in Santo Domingo during a merengue concert, resulting in a staggering 184 fatalities that included baseball players and politicians. Rescue operations have concluded with no further survivors found at the site. Frustrated relatives have been desperately seeking information about their loved ones at local hospitals and the Forensic Institute. Robbie Perez was performing on stage at Jet Set, a popular nightclub in Santo Domingo, when the tragic collapse occurred. France's President Emmanuel Macron suggested France may recognize Palestine as a state in June, aligning with nearly 150 other nations. Key Western powers such as the United States, Britain, Germany, and Japan have not yet followed suit. France, boasting a robust military, seeks to spearhead European defense autonomy despite existing challenges. Macron is viewed as a key European leader, driving France's continental vision amidst the war in the East and possible tariffs from the United States, especially with Germany's government situation. Defense ministers from the coalition of the willing, led by France and the UK, are slated to convene in Brussels. A law enacted last year in France now permits the expulsion of hundreds of foreign nationals who were previously protected due to their upbringing in the country, extending from France to Mali. Luxury fashion brands are wary of potential EU tariffs, given that American consumers represent 24% of global luxury goods spending and the potential impact on their Made in France's or Made in Italy product. Investigations revealed that the covers of 12th and 13th century hairy medieval books from French monasteries were crafted from sealskin, not deer or boar skin. The seals likely originated from Scandinavia, Scotland, Iceland, or Greenland, demonstrating extensive medieval trade networks. Turning to the United Kingdom, Prime Minister Keir Starmer is gaining prominence, partly influenced by actions of Donald Trump. The defense ministers of the Coalition of the Willing, jointly led by France and the UK, are scheduled to meet in Brussels. Within the European Union, luxury fashion brands are expressing concern about potential tariffs, considering that American shoppers account for 24% of global luxury goods spending and the impact on their Made in France's or Made in Italy product. South Korea's political landscape is shifting as opposition leader Lee Jae-myung declared his presidential candidacy after former President Yoon Suk Yeol's impeachment was upheld in April following his December declaration of martial law. The election is slated for June 3. In Seoul, spy cam detection devices have been installed in a palace public toilet to tackle the ongoing issue of illegal mocha filming. A probe is underway regarding a Chinese teenager and another Chinese student who were caught filming F-16 fighter jets, with claims emerging that the teenager is the son of a security official. They had nearly 100 images of military aircraft. The South Korean show Under 15 is also under scrutiny for potentially exploiting child performers by pushing them to imitate established K-pop stars with suggestive performances. From North Korea comes news of the death of Kim Shin-jo at 82, the sole survivor of a 1968 assassination squad sent to assassinate South Korean dictator Park Chung-hee. India has received Tahawar Hussain Rana, a Canadian citizen, who arrived in New Delhi on April 10, after being extradited to stand trial for his alleged involvement in the 2008 Mumbai terror attacks. Italian Foreign Affairs Minister Antonio Tajani visited India between April 11-12, holding meetings with President Murmu and Foreign Minister Jaishankar to bolster the relationship between the two countries. The emergence of Elon Musk's AI tool, Grok, is sparking debate in India due to its strong opinions on democracy and free speech. Concurrently, worries are mounting regarding the increase in online betting and fantasy gaming, leading to concerns about addiction and financial exploitation. In a move to expand internet access, Reliance Jio and Bharti Airtel have both partnered with SpaceX to bring the Starlink internet service to India. Shifting focus to the United States, the House of Representatives, guided by Speaker Mike Johnson, passed a Republican budget framework with a narrow 216-214 vote. This framework opens the door for Donald Trump's proposed tax cuts and immigration policies. Republicans Thomas Massie and Victoria Spartz sided with Democrats in opposition. In trade news, Apple is reportedly chartering cargo flights to ship iPhones from its Indian manufacturing plants to the U.S., having already transported 600 tons since March in an effort to circumvent potential tariffs. An official stated that U.S. President Trump's 90-day pause on reciprocal tariffs will be a relief for Indian exporters, especially shrimp exporters. Australia's 47th Parliament showcases increasing diversity, with men holding 55% of seats. Women now represent 39% of the House of Representatives and 58% of the Senate. The Labour Party has improved gender equality among its members, but the coalition still lags in female representation. Bock, a Linde-owned industrial gas company, is shifting nearly half of its electricity use in 3 states to solar power. This transition is expected to cut the company's Australian emissions by 40% by 2025, mirroring Rio Tinto's commitment. The AUKUS nuclear submarine deal is facing increased scrutiny due to the U.S. not granting Australia tariff exemptions, despite their defense alliance. Australia declined China's offer of a trade alliance aimed at offsetting U.S. tariffs, opting to broaden its economic ties. Defense Minister Richard Marles confirmed Australia's non-alignment with China on this issue. Shifting focus to the United States, Australian comedian Alice Fraser cancelled her planned trip after legal advice suggested that her jokes about Donald Trump and Elon Musk could lead to her being denied entry. She was scheduled to promote her book in New York in May. Canada's political landscape is heating up as Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre aims to unseat the current Prime Minister in what promises to be a tightly contested election. Poilievre's populist rhetoric, targeting elites and woke culture, has gained traction, particularly in Alberta, where he draws considerable support from admirers of Donald Trump. However, his appeal is not uniform across the country. The government is planning to use revenue from retaliatory tariffs to aid impacted businesses and workers, but specifics are still under development amid ongoing economic uncertainty. Adding to the economic concerns, a Chrysler assembly plant in Windsor, Ontario, will suspend operations for a 2-week period. Germany faces a challenging economic future, with forecasts suggesting stagnation for 2025 following 2 years of contraction. The threat of U.S. tariffs further clouds this outlook. Domestically, conservatives under Friedrich Merz and the SPD have formed a coalition aiming to boost Germany's economy. Diplomatic tensions have risen in the Balkans after Anna Luhrmann was expelled from the Serb entity of Bosnia in response to German sanctions. The European Union has decided to postpone its planned retaliatory tariffs on U.S. metal products. This delay comes as the U.S. government has paused its own tariffs, creating an opportunity for negotiation between the two economic powers. United States shoppers are concerned about the potential effects of President Donald Trump's high tariffs on imported foods from Asian supermarkets. Shifting focus to Southeast Asia, leaders whose export-driven economies are vulnerable are attempting to appease President Trump on trade matters. Thailand's finance minister even conceded that they may have to comply with U.S. demands. NPR's Martinez explored the impact of these tariffs on Southeast Asia with Bilahari Kausikan, a former Singapore diplomat, highlighting the risks to the global economy. Despite these concerns, the Hang Seng Index saw gains, paralleling trends in other Asian markets after Trump paused most tariffs, benefiting exporters and manufacturers significantly. The United States continues to grapple with the implications of President Trump's ongoing auto tariffs. These tariffs are causing concern in Solihull, England, where Jaguar Land Rover employs a significant portion of the population and has halted exports to the U.S. Meanwhile, Steve Witkoff, a real estate developer with ties to President Trump, is expected to head the U.S. negotiating team for a revamped Iran nuclear agreement. This appointment is notable given Witkoff's lack of known expertise in nuclear technology, as Trump aims to replace the previous Obama-era deal. United States officials are worried about Ronald Johnson, nominated to be the ambassador to Mexico. His actions as ambassador to El Salvador seem to favor El Salvador's president, Nayib Bukele, more than the U.S. In addition, court rulings in New York and Texas have restricted the deportation of Venezuelans to El Salvador. This indicates an ongoing legal fight over using the Alien Enemies Act for deportations. Meanwhile, in Canada, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's government is facing increasing pressure to address rising housing costs. New data reveals a significant surge in rental prices across major cities, prompting calls for immediate policy interventions. The opposition party is demanding a national housing strategy that includes rent controls and increased investment in affordable housing projects. Trudeau has indicated his government is exploring various options, including tax incentives for developers and stricter regulations on foreign investment in the housing market. Thailand has revoked the visa of U.S. academic Paul Chambers, a lecturer accused of royal insult. Chambers, who teaches civil-military relations at Naresuan University, faces charges under Thailand's strict laws protecting the monarchy. He denies the charges and is currently released on bail, though his passport has been withheld. His legal team expresses concern that Thailand may deport him. Sweden has detained a man suspected of spying on Uyghurs for China. Beijing has refuted allegations of human rights abuses against the ethnic minority group in Xinjiang. Meanwhile, in an unrelated incident, Danish chefs Flemming Hansen and Mette Hellbeck, formerly of the Stedsons Eco Resort in Sweden, have relocated to Guatemala. The move follows reports of significant tax debts and the abandonment of 158 barrels of human waste at their former establishment. The chefs have defended their management of the compost toilets as standard practice. Singaporean Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong and other top officials have publicly criticized former nominated Member of Parliament, NMP, Calvin Cheng for a controversial Facebook post made in March. Cheng had offered to send pro-Palestine activists to Gaza, drawing widespread condemnation. He has since issued an apology for the post. In other news, Singapore's position as a premier food hub faces challenges as restaurant closures increase due to rising operational costs and fewer customers. This downturn affects various food establishments, from traditional hawker stalls to high-end Michelin-starred restaurants. Moreover, Singapore's civil service continues to be a crucial source of political talent. It consistently provides candidates for the ruling People's Action Party, PAP, and increasingly, the opposition, encompassing individuals from diverse backgrounds, such as former army chiefs and clinical psychologists. Italy is currently grappling with the investigation into the murder of scientist Alessandro Coatti in Colombia, where Roman prosecutors suspect a case of mistaken identity linked to criminal plans. Adding a touch of diplomacy to the global stage, Pope Francis recently welcomed King Charles III and Queen Camilla to the Vatican. This private audience occurred during the royal couple's 4-day state visit to Italy, an event that also marked their 20th wedding anniversary. New Zealand's parliament overwhelmingly rejected a bill aimed at redefining the Treaty of Waitangi, the country's 1840 founding agreement between the Maori and the British Crown, after months of public protest. In other news from New Zealand, volunteer firefighters are petitioning the government to grant them an ACC, Accident Compensation Corporation, parity. They argue their non-taxable status leaves them without the accident coverage their paid colleagues receive. Furthermore, New Zealand is grappling with the intricacies of electric vehicle adoption. The country recognizes the environmental benefits of EVs depend on the cleanliness of the energy sources used to power them. The United States is weighing the closure of its embassy in Mogadishu, Somalia, amidst escalating security threats from al-Shabaab. Despite this consideration, the U.S. remains committed to supporting Somalia by supplying training and equipment to the Danab, the country's elite special forces units. Sudan has formally accused the United Arab Emirates at the International Court of Justice of violating the Genocide Convention through its alleged support of the Rapid Support Forces, RSF. These accusations include providing arms and financial backing to the RSF. Amnesty International has documented widespread allegations against the RSF, including 36 cases of sexual violence against women and girls, some as young as 15 years old. Turning to South Sudan, the main opposition party finds itself in turmoil as leaders voted to replace their current leader. This decision comes a mere 2 weeks after government forces arrested him, escalating political tensions within the country. Panama faces renewed interest from the U.S. regarding a potential reestablishment of American military bases, purportedly aimed at countering China's growing influence over the crucial Panama Canal. Simultaneously, Cape Hutchison Holdings Limited is facing increased scrutiny over its port operations within Panama. The allegations center around a subsidiary's potential breach of concession contract terms, adding another layer of complexity to Panama's geopolitical balancing act. The United States has reinstated urgent food aid to several nations. Afghanistan and Yemen are excluded, even with their critical needs. Aid officials warn of dire consequences. Millions could face starvation. Vital health programs for women and children will cease. Serbia is grappling with significant political uncertainty 5 months after the collapse of the railway station canopy in Novi Sad, casting a shadow on the nation's political future and the resolution of the current power dynamic. Meanwhile, on social media, Elon Musk is prominently supporting Mario Nawfal, a Dubai-based online personality. Nawfal has become known for conducting interviews with Russian individuals and prominent allies of Vladimir Putin. Similar to Musk and Donald Trump, Nawfal has also provided a platform for figures and movements associated with the far right. The United States has imposed fresh sanctions on Iran, as announced by the Treasury Department. This occurred just 2 days after President Donald Trump alluded to potential direct discussions between the U.S. and Tehran. Meanwhile, in Iran, an official was removed from his post after facing backlash for an extravagant journey to Argentina. Across the ocean in Argentina, legislators have voiced concerns regarding their intelligence agency. Their criticism stems from the agency's decision to allow the Iranian official entry into Argentina using a tourist visa. They argue that official protocols should have been followed instead. Pakistan is experiencing a surge in Afghan migrants crossing the border as the country accelerates its expulsion program. This action has drawn criticism from the Taliban regime in Kabul, which condemns the forced deportation as un-Islamic. The United Nations and Pakistani authorities have both acknowledged the rise in deportations. Vietnam's former battlefields, such as Hamburger Hill and Khe Sanh, now draw veterans and tourists, reflecting on the Vietnam War through the lens of history, film, and media. Nintendo has navigated potential tariffs on its Vietnam-assembled consoles, ensuring a strong entry for Switch 2 in the US market. Casablanca is best explored without the aid of modern technology, according to one traveler. Issuing guidebooks and smartphones allows for unexpected discoveries. The traveler aims to reclaim the serendipitous nature of travel. Getting lost in the city is part of the intended experience. Fiji's government denies claims of medical supply shortages, forcing doctors to reuse equipment. The Fijian Drua rugby team is under pressure to win consistently to reach the Super Rugby Pacific top 6. Myanmar is grappling with the aftermath of a severe earthquake, prompting a visit from UN Special Envoy Julie Bishop of Australia, who engaged with the military government's foreign minister. The disaster has also become a breeding ground for misinformation, as AI-generated videos and deceptive images exaggerating the earthquake's devastation circulate online. WHO has launched a fact-checking initiative to counter these false narratives. Palau's President Suranjal Whips Jr. strongly supports Australia's bid to host the Pacific United Nations Climate Change Conference, COP31, next year. He emphasized the critical need to address climate change. Whips also reiterated Palau's unwavering support for Taiwan, amidst growing pressure from China, stating their alliance is firm. The Bahamas is currently facing scrutiny after the drowning of Denari McElmont, a 23-year-old American tourist, at the Atlantis Bahamas resort on Paradise Island. Police investigations indicate no suspicion of foul play, but McElmont's family seeks further clarification regarding the circumstances of his death. Brazil will compete in Group B of the World Baseball Classic's first round in Houston. Turning to Denmark, Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen, during a visit to Greenland, stated that Denmark will not cede Greenland to the United States. In Ecuador, the indigenous movement is experiencing internal divisions regarding which candidate to support in the upcoming presidential election. French President Emmanuel Macron intends to leverage the strong ties between France and Egypt to advocate for a ceasefire in the Middle East, while activists urge him to address human rights concerns in Cairo. Focusing on the European Union, all but one of the 27 member countries voted to impose tariffs on specific U.S. products, preceding President Trump's announcement of a 90-day pause on U.S. tariffs. Slovakia's economy, reliant on the automotive sector, is especially susceptible to potential U.S. car tariffs. In Guatemala, an ancient altar discovered in Tikal reveals cultural mixing between the Maya and Teotihuacan civilizations. Indonesian authorities have denied claims from Papua separatist rebels that the 17 gold miners killed were security forces members. Shifting to Ireland, the decline of traditional thatching has spurred the creation of the Donegal Thatching School to preserve the craft. Malaysia is grappling with a rise in sex crimes involving minors, indicating child protection deficiencies. In Mexico, conservationists are working to revitalize the Mexican River Delta, restoring wetlands and wildlife. Lofoten, Norway, is celebrated for its scenic beauty, offering opportunities for backcountry skiing, hiking, and sailing. The Philippines is seeing renewed calls to address crime syndicates following the murders of Chinese-Filipino businessman Anson Key and his driver. Poland is experiencing concern over the U.S. decision to reposition troops from a base near the Ukrainian border. Across Spain, tens of thousands have protested against the housing crisis. Suspected U.S. airstrikes near Hodeida, Yemen, have reportedly caused at least 10 deaths, according to Houthi rebels. Zimbabwe has commenced compensating white farmers who lost land during reforms 2 decades ago. And that's a wrap for today's news, because even headlines need a nap. Stay curious, stay kind, and let the noise fade as you find your quiet. Take care, stay awesome, and I'll see you next time on WHAM Today.